Tarnava. Welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
So this is an exciting conversation because I have been using your molecular hydrogen tablets for years. Whenever I travel, I'm loading up on these things. I'm taking like 4 for every 90 minutes I'm in the air flying. Take us back to 2015 and where were you at in your life and what sparked this innovation in the molecular hydrogen industry that you've created?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll go even a little farther back to 2014 when I was at my peak of physical health. I had a business that I was away for about a week a month, working like 120 hours a week on the road. But then when I was home, I maybe had an hour or two of phone calls a day. So I was, training 6 to 8 hours a day. Mostly split between various martial arts, Muay Thai, jiu-jitsu, but CrossFit also, and doing some, smaller CrossFit competitions. And I got really, really sick. We still don't really know what it was that I was sick from. It was a virus of some kind, but overnight I had central nervous system shut down. At first, they thought it was exercise induced, but when I stopped training, it didn't help and it didn't really fit because my CRP was like 34. It should be below 1, right? Even when you're like really sick, it doesn't really go between 1 and 3. I was at 34.
That's the highest I've ever heard.
Yeah, it was crazy. I was doing blood tests twice a week, right, to try and figure out what was going on. For I think about 6 weeks. I was doing 2 blood tests a week, and then the doctors were afraid, am I anemic because I'm drawing so much blood, right? Or like what's going on? I was iron deficient.
Chicken and the egg.
Yeah, I was iron deficient, and I was eating 6,000 to 8,000 calories a day of mostly green vegetables. Lots of red meat. I was eating probably 8 eggs a day. So it was crazy. I had sudden onset narcolepsy also. If I sat down for about a minute, I'd fall asleep where I was. And I was sleeping 16 to 18 hours a day. Now, what's really bizarre is, when I say I had like central nervous system shut down, I had absolutely no reactive movements whatsoever. But I didn't lose any power. Right.
When you say no reactive movements, you mean like if the old school, you're sitting on the doctor's bed and he hits your knee with the hammer, your leg wouldn't go.
I'm talking more like, fast twitch muscle movement. Yeah, like I went from having like a standing 54-inch box jump and being able to do about 15 to 20 bar muscle ups unbroken to I couldn't do a chest bar and I couldn't jump an inch off the ground onto a plate, right? But my deadlift, bench press, and squat were unaffected. I didn't lose any strength, right? So it was
interesting,
really bizarre, right?
How are you at dodging punches, considering mixed martial arts were a big part?
Yeah, no, I stopped going to martial arts.
Okay.
At that time, I can't do it. It wasn't happening. But I was still trying to go and lift some weights at CrossFit, it was my life, I was trying to power through just a little bit, reduced. And actually I felt a little better when I was up moving, working out. But then as soon as I'd sit back down, I fell asleep against the wall a couple times at CrossFit. It was crazy when I'd sit down after, doing a bunch of squats and deadlifts. I couldn't do anything super high intensity, but just sit down to rest and fall asleep against the wall. It was really, really bizarre. When the dust finally settled, in a period of 3-4 days between the start of the week and the end of the week, my CRP went from 34 below 1. Right. So
what changed there? Because that's a huge shift. It's a huge drop.
I must have beat the virus, or something, But when that happened, within a week after that, my joints tightened. I now have arthritis in 9 spots, right? And the one that was hit the most was my left shoulder. And it was frozen within a week, right? So I went, it was really bizarre. Now they started doing x-rays and they're like, you have osteoarthritis. So the high inflammation must have ravaged my joints pretty aggressively, 6-week period. All 9 spots that I have arthritis, I've had serious injuries, right? So there are probably spots I would have developed arthritis in my 50s and my 60s. It just fast tracked to happen like immediately. At that time, I went on like 1,000 milligrams a day of like prescription naproxen. That's like a leave. It's a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug. Did a couple of cortisone injections, and I kept on I quit martial arts at that point, but I tried to keep on doing CrossFit. Right? And I had actually bought, a water ionizer at that time too, unrelated, right? Because I had been interested in hydrogen for a little bit for being a selective, free radical scavenger. So I just, like I'm having health issues now, and I bought it. Didn't really understand the very, close relationship between dysregulation of redox status and dysregulation of inflammatory response. I thought they were completely separate things. So months went on. I fainted a few times when I was at the box working out, and I developed ulcers, multiple ulcers. So I had to quit the Aleve like completely, and my shoulder completely froze again. At that time, I went back to PubMed. I started scouring it for things that could, maybe, regulate the inflammatory response, and, hydrogen popped up, right? And that really pissed me off. One, it was confusing because, again, I didn't get the relationship between, regulation of redox and regulation of inflammatory response, how interconnected they are. Two, this ionizer was clearly not working to loosening my shoulder because my shoulder was frozen. So I read a bunch of these studies, and it just dawned on me, how do I even know, this machine's making hydrogen, right? These ionizer salespeople pissed me off with every single claim they made, right? All of their claims of miracle water benefits really got under my skin and irritated me. I viewed them as liars in every single aspect. And I thought, why did I just take their word for it that this has hydrogen in the water? It's just kind of a disconnect. So I bought the H2 Blue, the testing reagent, and there was no detectable hydrogen. So I thought, I went to reading, tried to slow down the flow rate, and as slow as it goes, still no hydrogen. Decalcification on the plates. Took it in for a deep clean. There was still no hydrogen. Now I know I live in Vancouver, and our TDS is less than 3 parts per million, so total dissolved solids is less than 3 ppm. The ionizers need electrolytes in the water for conductivity, right? So that's why it was making like no hydrogen. But now I know even under best case scenarios, they're like maybe at the minimum therapeutic dose, if that, and they can calcify pretty quickly afterwards. So I felt pretty scammed out of the $4,500, and most people would say, screw hydrogen and just go on with their lives. But that actually gave me motivation, because I'm like, I don't know if hydrogen works. I haven't gotten it yet. Right? Started buying the full studies.
Did you buy your machine new?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just making sure. Cool.
Yeah. So I started buying like a lot of the human studies, and buying the full, paying the $40 for the full study to read the full method section on how they are making hydrogen. A lot of the studies were using magnesium. So I'm like, okay, this could be a good route. I started trying to buy magnesium sticks. They weren't getting the hydrogen I wanted. There was another tablet on the market that's since out of business that you have to kind of drop in water, get a convex meniscus, close a cap tightly, put upside down, and drink the next day. And it maybe gets like 2 ppm in half a liter. I found that one, and I got really excited, and I ordered them. And, because I'd been trying to get powders, like magnesium powder in at this time. It's tightly controlled in the US. You need an end use, it's, controlled by the DOD and the State Department for International and stuff. I really couldn't get it back then for myself personally. And then like I was trying to get it from like China and Russia, and like I was going through a lot of problems there. There's only a few countries in the world that make this stuff. So these tablets were a great solution, but when I got them, I prepared it, how they said, and I took my first sip, and it was one of the most disgusting things I've ever tasted in my life. Like I gagged and I spit it all over my kitchen, right? It was unpalatably gross, right? And then I measured it, and I had it written down what it is. It was something pathetic, like, 0.5 ppm or something, in the way they did it. So I just started thinking, like why it was, and, the pH seemed really off and really alkaline to me, which means it's not reacting. There's a bit of a metallic taste to our tablets. It was probably 10 times worse, in this first one, because they're trying to make it really alkaline and, high, like 9 or 10 pH. So I started adding like lemon juice to it. I started really playing, with MacGyvering, like these tablets to get it to work. And all of a sudden I was getting up to getting like, 3 ppm, right? And I was drinking like, a lot of these tablets every day, like 3 liters worth a day, and my shoulder unfroze and my hip unfroze. So I went like in jiu-jitsu from, being able to like, play the rubber guard, right? Like be able to touch my left ankle to my face with like ease, to not being able to do a butterfly on the ground, right? Like my hip tightened up so much. So everything loosened.
There's a lot of people listening that are experiencing hip issues and declining flexibility right now. So this is very interesting that you've gone to one extreme and then been able to bring it back.
Right. It didn't take me back to where I was in my prime, but now I can, lift my ankle probably, 6-8 inches off the ground. I can effortlessly do a butterfly. So I've never gained back the mobility that I had before, but back then I was, I was stretching in a sauna probably half an hour a day on top of everything else. I was lighter, you know what I mean? Like, so, and I didn't have arthritis, right? So it still impinged a little bit. If I was the weight I was, in summer of like 2014 and, was in the sauna every day doing this stuff, I probably wouldn't be as limber as I was back then, but I'd be better than I am right now. But right now I'm probably even, better than the average person. I can pretty easily touch my knuckles to the ground now. I can, like I said, lift my arthritic side, 8 inches off the ground. The only thing really that H2 hasn't helped is my shoulder, other than pain and unfreezing it. But I just had surgery. I have bone-on-bone arthritis. I had a fully torn labrum. I have a partially torn rotator cuff. I need another surgery. I'm waiting for my next MRI. Either the surgery was a failure, in which case I'm really out of options, because what they did is they repaired my labrum and they cleaned up the arthritis, and they're hoping the rotator would heal on its own, right? Taking the other stressors away. Or it's looking a lot more likely from, tests my physio and orthopedic surgeon have done, is the rehab actually fully tore my rotator cuff. So that's what we're crossing our fingers for, because if it's fully torn rotator cuff, that means the surgery was a success, or at least didn't harm it, and we can now go in, repair my rotator, and I can get back to maybe doing a little bit more upper body exercise. Sure. But yeah, so I was prepping like 3 liters of this water a day, like.
How many tablets were you going through? Like, what would be the equivalent of your current tablets, right? What was the equivalent of how many you were consuming per day back then?
6 a day. So I was going through 3 bottles of this old shitty formula. And then it was getting sent to Canada, and I was having to pay duties and taxes because the companies weren't filling out like a NAFTA form. So this was costing me, like almost doubling the cost of bringing it in. $180 plus probably another $150 every time in duties and taxes. And then conversion, it was like really expensive, like monthly for me. And these companies were as unethical as the ionizer people, right? Mm-hmm. Making all these claims of curing cancer and like doing this and doing that, just really stuff that really, really, really got under my skin. And they were all harassing me. Like, I didn't realize how embryonic, like hydrogen was back then in 2015. I didn't realize how esoteric it was, right? Even in the health communities, nobody had heard of it. So I'm one of the, probably one of their first customers, and they're like, oh, do you want to be a sales rep? We have an MLM, I'm getting calls on my personal line, to like join and do this stuff. I'm like, man, I just want to buy this stuff. Mm-hmm. Right? They're harassing me. I'm paying all this crazy money. I actually have to like jerry rig it to actually work it all, and all this stuff. And I just said, this is ridiculous. And I went back to the drawing board, and I got in, elemental magnesium from both Russia and China, and I found a source in the US, but it ended up having ingots, like big chunks in it too, so I had to strain it. It was a pain in the ass. And I went back to just trying to formulate my own tablet at that time just for personal use, so I didn't have to deal with any of these companies.
Because you wanted a higher part per million, or...
I wanted to work better. I wanted it to not taste as bad, and I didn't want to give money to any of these companies.
Okay. Right? All right. Understood.
Really ethically getting under my skin, right? Mm-hmm. At that time, I'm a bit of an autodidact. I tend to read hours a day, at sometimes 8 to 10 hours a day. But, then when I'm traveling on business, I don't get to read at all. So, maybe it averages 4 or 5 hours a day that I read just to try and advance my knowledge across numerous fields. And I thought to myself, I understand the chemistry well enough, but I don't want to be, a Darwin Award winner here. I'm dealing with, mm-hmm. Explosive magnesium that burns at thousands of degrees, Celsius, and, making hydrogen gas. And, is this Dunning-Kruger? Do I think I know it? And really, I don't know it at all. And I'm going to blow myself up. So I found my founding partner. He's a PhD medicinal chemist from the pharmaceutical industry. I emailed him. I found his resume online. It was actually an old resume. He was looking for gig work, but he had started a position in the meantime. And at first he told me it was the worst pseudoscience he'd ever heard in his life, right? He said, save your money, like stop doing it. So I sent him a list of some of the better studies and, kind of the best I could back then. Refuted all his points and explained, yeah, that's true, but this is why it's irrelevant in this situation, and went through that. And he got back to me and said, yeah, I guess this looks like there's enough evidence for a supplement anyways. And he said it kind of, I'm imagining it now, like he said it kind of like in a snarky way. He's from England, so he's got a, English accent, and, like, he said, I suppose there's enough evidence for a supplement by email. So it makes me laugh now. But we got to work. He was charging me by the hour, like pretty high rate per hour. And I was sending him a study every day to keep like learning about it. And just kind of serendipitously, I sent him a study on Hep B, which I didn't realize that he was in charge at his company of, developing a drug that they had in phase 3.
You're talking about hepatitis B?
Hepatitis B.
Okay, so we're kind of circling back into viral stuff here.
Yeah.
Possibly being a through line in your story.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is more to do with him gaining interest. He became a partner, right? Because it didn't actually get rid of the Hep B, but it was dealing with the oxidative stress and, a lot of the symptoms of the Hep B. So it wasn't a cure by any means. And it's just one study. It was like 60 participants, so it was a decent sample size, but it hasn't been replicated. But he read the study and read the full paper, and he called me for lunch and he said, listen, like, I've just had to kind of trust the findings of the other research teams on all these other studies. He's like, but this is what I'm working on right now. And, unless this has been frauded, this is impactful, this works. You need to look at commercializing this, right? Are you looking for a partner? And I've been, mulling over the idea of commercializing, for the couple months we've been working together. But I had a, relatively successful business that I wasn't that happy with. I'd been losing interest in it. And I had no experience in this field. So it was kind of like, who am I to go into this area? There's got to be, smarter, more educated people with
good old imposter syndrome.
That exactly. Yeah. But, Dr. Holland, it was like, we should go for this. I got some other really good, at that time I started, it took us like 3 weeks to like blow the first tablet out of the water, right? And I started hand pressing them for about 40 people, mostly, friends and family, some athletes locally that had injuries and tears. And the reception was overwhelming. I got a wait list, friends of friends, like other guys from the gym, from martial arts, CrossFit, saying, how can I get this stuff? And of course, it's taking me an hour to make a month's supply for someone. It's not a business. I'm hammering away at my table, but I'm like, man, everyone is loving this stuff and seeing benefits. Like,
what were the benefits that they were experiencing?
Lots for like acute injuries, like muscle tears and stuff, recovering quickly, joint issues. Lots of family members with arthritis, that were just experiencing relief. Lots of, big energy boosts in it. And it's actually interesting. It's one of our biggest testimonials is an increase in energy. Mm-hmm. And I can't go too much into the results, but, it's under peer review right now. I'm not sure when this will air, but hopefully by about February, it'll be published. We just did a study with a decent size in a crossover manner on 24-hour sleep deprivation for raising alertness. The tablet versus 100 milligrams of caffeine. Mm. They were both very significant, and there's no statistical difference between the two, right? Mm. So the tablet,
I use both in those situations.
So here's what is in that study, it seems to show in the alertness test that hydrogen and caffeine alter completely different aspects of alertness, right? Mm. So to me, that shows a synergistic effect. Mm-hmm. Like hydrogen's improving areas that caffeine doesn't improve, and caffeine's improving areas that hydrogen doesn't improve. So I do the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. I take my caffeine when I take my hydrogen, right? When I'm feeling a little groggy and down. So that's a cool study that's on its way right now. But we were just getting all this overwhelming feedback, and I just thought to myself, I'm like, I've invented a couple other things that I was more passionate about than what I'm doing right now, and I didn't go for it, and I regret it. How much am I going to regret it if I don't try? If I see someone else do it in a year or 2 years, and I say, what if this was me, right? So I kind of pushed all in, right? And it took us 3 weeks to get the first tablet that, from a chemistry standpoint, was working how we wanted it to. It then took us over a year, 2,000 iterative adjustments, 2,000 failed formulas, 15 failed scale-up attempts to get a production-ready tablet.
Did you say 2,000 failed formulations?
Yeah. So to get it to go from making one at a time to making millions at a fast pace on a production press, you have to add excipients. You need to make sure it's flowing. You need to make sure it's consistent. Every tablet is the exact same. It's homogeneous, like everything that is going on. So it was 2,000, failed formula tries, and I told you off there about kind of like the stages we went through in R&D to get there. So we didn't run 2,000 on the big press. We probably ran like 70 on the big production scale. But if they're failing, on the single press, they're going to definitely fail on the large scale format. So yeah, it was 15 failed scale up attempts. Couple thousand failed formulations that didn't pan out until we got our first production ready tablet. That was one that we again had to seal in a bottle, but ours was getting like 3 to 4 ppm in like 5 minutes. So it was a massive improvement over the previous sealed tablets. And then again, it was just dumb luck that we kind of discovered this open cup.
And just for people that are listening and may not be familiar, when you're talking about things like ppm, we're talking about parts per million. We're talking about parts per million of H2 gas, right? So like you got a tablet that you throw in a glass of water or a bottle of water. It doesn't seem to make too much of a difference with your tablets. And
it's
then
much better in an open glass, actually.
It's better in an open glass than a sealed bottle.
Yeah, way better.
Why is that?
So I'll go into that next. And
don't let me take you down a rabbit hole. I just got curious there.
That's actually the next thing that I'm planning on going into, anyways. But for listeners, so I'll often say ppm, but I'm really trying to get over to saying milligrams a liter because it makes a lot more sense to most people. ppm is lingo that's been used in the field for years, but it's hard to understand, and then that's a concentration. It's hard to convert to a dosage. ppm is actually the exact same thing in this case as milligrams a liter. And then I had half a liter. So if I had 10 milligrams a liter, that's 5 milligrams of hydrogen, right? Mm-hmm. Hydrogen is dosed just like any other molecule by milligram, right? So, we should really talk about, H2 in milligrams and milligrams a liter. So we're trying to get to 3 to 4 milligrams a liter and half a liter of water. And as we're trying to get it faster to like 2 minutes, this phenomenon kept on happening. Well, we're getting to 4 milligrams a liter, but the water was turning white when we opened the cap and then clear, and now all of a sudden we're down to 1.6. And it took us 3 months of beating our head into the wall, trying to get this to stop happening, until we just thought, well, it's doing this. What if we try to do this in an open container, right? It just it dawned on me. I was lying in a bath, and I was just thinking about the problem, and I jumped out and got tablets in H2 Blue, and I just, was dropping them in the bath water and testing the water. And I'm like, man, there's still hydrogen in here, in the bath. And then I jumped out of the bath and tested it, and I got 3.5 ppm in about 2 minutes, at that time, in the tablets that had been designed for a sealed container. And there's a quote I really, really, really like and resonates with me in this case from Isaac Asimov that said, people think the greatest scientific discoveries are met with, eureka, I've done it. But really they're met with, that's funny, right? So we didn't understand what was going on, and we're beating our heads into the wall for months until, it just dawned on us, why stop fighting this? This is clearly happening, even if it doesn't make sense right now. Let's try and make sure it happens, right? So we went down that road and went back to the drawing board. It was, months and months and months of R&D, and we kept on just refining it. We had to reformulate everything that we'd done from square one, right? Doing everything to just really maximize this.
Did you have pressure from people who were involved or even just close to you that knew what was going on and were telling you, you got to monetize this at some point? It's good enough, put it out there, start selling it, and then iterate it. Like, what were some of the other voices? Because I'm hearing a story of relentless persistence and determination and obsession with quality. And I can imagine that there probably weren't many people on the business side or just that were in your life that were understanding where you were coming from in this process.
Yeah, I mean, most people were saying it's good enough. My contract manufacturers were saying it's good enough. We were selling to some people who really, really, really wanted it. You know what I mean? Like, we launched our own brand because a lot of people really wanted this stuff. And then within 3 weeks, we were getting calls from other companies that had been private labeling the first tablet saying, can we do this? But we didn't go out and kind of beat the pavement to try and get new brands and to really push the marketing, because to me, it wasn't good enough. I also wanted clinical evidence, and I wanted legal regulations, right? Because in the US right now, between 92 to 96% of supplements are not legally registered with the FDA, right? It's called a new dietary ingredient status. And anything you change to manufacturing requires an NDI submission to the FDA to show why it's safe, right? Why you're doing this safe for sale to the public. Right? You change how you extract an ingredient, you need to do this. You change anything, you need to do this stuff. So we spent 3 years and a lot of money and did a massive submission because this is very, very novel. It's very different than anything else that was on the market. And we got a no objection from the FDA as a new dietary ingredient. So we're the only legal hydrogen supplement. And that's, any open cup hydrogen tablet we manufacture for has this NDI status. And that was just really, really important to me. I'm a bit of in some ways I'm a perfectionist, and in some ways I just, don't give a, shit at all, like it's just, that's good enough. But for this, I really, really wanted to keep improving it. And I still had strongly that imposter syndrome. I still had in my head that if I don't have my gas, my foot on the floor, gas to the floor, there's people with more money, bigger teams, smarter, more experience that are going to catch me. Mm-hmm. Right. So it was really this lack of confidence that it's good enough, that it needs to be better. It needs to be better. Right. Like, there's other people doing this. I need to spend every waking moment setting myself apart in every way possible. That really drove it.
There's a lot of good stuff that comes from that fear of competition, that they're training harder than you, that they're, there's even great things that come from, like, do you love me now, Dad? Am I good enough for you now, Dad? And as much as we resist those things, it's like that's part of creating something special. You got to have the drive. You got to have the right habits and doing hard things that elevate you daily. And then you also have to be okay with recognizing that some of this stuff is outside of your control, and like surrender to those things while allowing like the perfect storm of all that to come together.
100%. And I think of the mental game, just like, physiologically, we want this homeostatic function of our redox, of our inflammatory response. Like, oxidative stress isn't a bad thing, right? It's the delicate balance, the homeostasis between reduction and oxidation. Inflammation isn't a bad thing. We need it for our, defense mechanism. It's when it's too much or too little that's an issue. I think we need a delicate balance between, confidence and insecurity, right, to drive us forward. Like, just blind confidence is not a good thing, right? You always have to have self-doubt, right? What more could I do? How could this be better, right? How can I be improving here? What are other people doing that are going to set them apart from what I'm doing, right? But then have the confidence to act and say, this is what I'm going to do and this is how I'm going to do it. Right. So that really propelled, myself and our company forward for a long time. Even now, it's like I'm going through it a bit again. I have a whole new type of imposter syndrome because I'm finishing up a book chapter for Elsevier USA, right, on hydrogen as an exogenous supplement to potentially extend the human health span. And I've written a lot of content, and I'm working with 9 public research teams right now, and a lot of the professors were trying to encourage me with my writing to write them in a bit of more academic style and publish them. But I'm like, I'm not affiliated with any university. I don't have a PhD. Like, who am I to publish work? And they're like, no, you really
no one wants to read that in that voice. Like, you could still communicate the same things in a colloquial way where you could refer to the science, but in a way that's like that.
Yeah, and that's what I try and do is blend it. But it had me again, like, who would accept my publication? Who am I to publish this stuff? But a few of the professors that I've become, decently good friends with now have kept on kind of encouraging me. And then, one professor invited me to write this book chapter, right? And, I brought up the point. I'm like, is, Elsevier going to accept it? Like, I don't have a background in science. I don't have a background in academia. This is all professors and doctors contributing. And he said, if you get, 2 referees, so it's like professors, that agree to be my pre-reviewers before it's submitted for official review, right? It's okay because he's in charge of the entire book deal. So I got those, and it's kind of, again, I've spent probably, 150 hours now just obsessively going over this 5,000 word article, and I usually write 1,500 words an hour, like pretty effortlessly. So it's just that insecurity that I don't belong in this area has driven me to review everything. And then a lot of the stuff I'm reviewing, I've sent data over to a different professor, and I'm like, I think I've found some trends in the data here. And he's like, let's write a meta-analysis and systematic review. I agree. So it's just kind of spiraled into my obsession, to prove that I do know what I'm doing, like, to not make a fool out of myself when I submit this book chapter has really driven me to be very, very obsessive and go in a lot deeper than I think a lot of others would.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've now gotten to a place where the tablets that you've created through all this iteration are the industry leaders. And it's because it's delivering superior results. When people test them, they're seeing higher parts per million than other products on the market. Let's talk a little bit about some of the science, because I know that you spend a lot of time keeping your finger on the pulse of the scientific literature. And we did an episode with Tyler LeBaron from the Molecular Hydrogen Institute. And we talked about some of the science.
And he can go in a lot deeper to the biochemistry than I can. Yeah. I have reviewed, I've read about 1,000 of the publications. I've read every human publication. There's 80 publications right now in humans. There's another 7 under peer review. I've read all of them multiple times. I've gotten, lots of the raw data that I've scoured through looking for responders, non-responders, which it does appear that there are responders and non-responders versus hydrogen. But,
I've certainly seen that too.
Yeah. There's people who don't, there's a small percentage of people who don't respond at all, maybe even upwards of 20%, right? And then from there, it seems about 50-50, 50% or 40% of people seem to respond, physiologically in a significant way, but maybe not noticeable immediately. And there seems to be about 40% of like super responders, people who very strongly respond and notice a strong benefit, sometimes even instantly, increased energy, and people get head tingles, stuff like that. Hydrogen is, the more I'm learning about it, and the more the story changes, and it's something, I've done 2 recorded talks with Tyler, and it's, the story doesn't change, it evolves, right? As new information comes out, we can look back on all the old studies and it gives them better context, right? So, maybe the conclusions change from these old studies. They no longer fit the story, but that's because the story is always evolving, right? That doesn't rule out the old data. It just makes the conclusions not current, right? From what we can observe from that data. It's like going back and reading a good book that you haven't read in a decade, or watching your favorite movie a decade later. All of your life experiences, all of your knowledge gives you new context and new input into that work, so you can look at it from a completely different perspective, right? So that's what's really going on with the science. And we're learning things like hydrogen likely doesn't have any antioxidant capacity in vivo, so in a living person. It does in vitro, very weak, only seems to reduce the hydroxyl radical, the nastiest one. It probably doesn't do that in the body, but what it does is a lot more significant. It seems to regulate our redox status, both beneficial free radicals like nitric oxide, right, which we need, but also our antioxidant production like glutathione, catalase, superoxide dismutase, by regulation of the NRF2 pathway. And importantly, it doesn't seem to do that over homeostasis. So a lot of like NRF2 pathway activators, can maybe some of them can maybe decrease cancer risk. Some of them can increase cancer risk. You know what I mean? Because it's guesswork. Activation is guesswork. Hydrogen, in all evidence from in vitro to rodent to human, there's a few human studies now, has shown to have beneficial responses to cancer. Now, we need way better evidence to know this for sure, and there's probably going to be an adjuvant therapy, but that's a concern of NRF2 activation that doesn't seem to apply to hydrogen. Likewise, lots of antioxidant therapies. Actually, high-dose antioxidant therapies have been cut dead, all the clinical trials, because it was discovered a number of years ago that just flooding ourselves with extra antioxidants can increase risk of cancer, can increase all-cause mortality. Well, hydrogen doesn't do that. In some cases, it's actually pro-oxidative stress, not anti-inflammatory, some models. And as we're starting to learn more that hydrogen is likely a form of hormesis, right, that makes a lot more sense, right? Like exercise acutely raises oxidative stress and inflammation that leads to long-lasting reductions in chronic inflammation and oxidative stress by activating, anti-inflammatory, cytokines, and activating our, NRF2 pathway for extra of our own, endogenous antioxidants. So not only does hydrogen seem to be working in this way, it seems to be potentiating the other forms of hormesis, right? So one really cool, and say you give high-dose antioxidants to someone exercising, it actually blunts the benefits of exercise, of hypertrophy gains, right? With hydrogen, it's actually shown to be an ergogenic agent, right? It's improving exercise capacity and recovery. So there was a really, really cool study that was done in Brazil in a forced swimming test in mice. There was a control group that swam and the hydrogen group. In the hydrogen group, it actually showed that it elevated acutely their oxidative stress even more so than the exercises, than the control group was, but they swam longer, were more stressed out completely, but then the redox was balanced quicker, right? They had a stronger antioxidant effect after workout that brought them back to recovery faster. So the rats swam longer, they were more stressed out, but then they recovered faster.
Well, this is really interesting, and especially because like one of the things that Tyler shared on during our conversation was the evidence on benefits coming from pairing molecular hydrogen consumption with like a sauna, and so some of like stacking.
Yeah, which is, I wrote a 25,000 word piece with about 500 citations on hormesis, 7 parts. Heat exposure was obviously one of the parts. The last part was hydrogen. So there's, hydrogen releases heat shock proteins, right? And I think one of the biggest revelations in what we're seeing here in hydrogen having.
Hydrogen or the sauna?
Well, they both release heat shock proteins.
Hydrogen, molecular hydrogen consumption releases heat shock proteins? Really? I did not know that. All right. Please continue. Fascinating.
So one of the coolest things about hydrogen is not only does it seem to work in a similar manner that most of these other forms of hormesis that most biohackers, most health conscious people are doing, at least, some of them, like, whether it's exercise or cold exposure, heat exposure, fasting, all these things. It seems to protect against the deleterious damages from them, right? So it has this rescuing, this protective effect. And we don't know when hydrogen is harmful. Like even exercise, you can exercise too much. If you exercise 8 hours a day, you're in a chronic disease state, right?
You may have been doing that prior to not feeling great. It sounded like you were doing a lot of CrossFit, a lot of MMA. I was thinking, you had to be spending 6 to 8 hours a day in the gym, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then I was going to the track and doing sprints, and I was going for runs once a week, and I was going hiking for fun. You know what I mean? Even when I was taking calls and working, I was, doing sit-ups and, overhead squats and, stuff in my living room. I don't know, I had boundless energy in my mid to late 20s, and that kind of crashed and, fell apart. And I wonder about the damages I did to my body by overtraining for a long, long time. And, that's why we see a lot of MMA fighters, a lot of, pro athletes, a lot of Olympians, some of these guys have, free testosterone levels like that of an 80-year-old, right? They are impaired. And these are even guys who haven't taken, steroids and stuff, right? Because their body is in such a damaged state, right? And they're never taking a day off, right? And it's that same mentality that I had, with hydrogen, now that I'm having with this book chapter, that someone else is training harder than me, someone else is better than me, right? That drives athletes, and athletes will not take recovery days, right? And you need your recovery days. Overtraining impairs your performance, and it hurts your health. So hydrogen seems to protect against all these things. You're in a sauna too much. And I think we really need to figure out better dosing protocols genetically for forms of hormesis. I don't shiver in a cryo chamber, right? I like being cold 6 hours a day. I'll take a cold shower, I'll go out, I have a tie bag on my patio. Even in the wintertime, there can be snow on the ground, and I go out and I start, doing body squats and kicking my bag and, doing some lightweight stuff. And then I'll leave the windows open in the winter, and I'm cold for 6 hours. The cold does not bug me. I probably need to be a lot colder than the average person to get the benefits from hormesis, but I have fainted a few times doing hot yoga. I will drink 4 liters of water, in a hot yoga, and sometimes I don't make it through, I pass out, right? I've gotten heat stroke, in Mexico, open sea, kayaking, just after a few hours with plenty of water. I do not deal well with the heat, right? So what might be a good heat routine for me wouldn't be beneficial because it's not enough for another person. And what might be great cold exposure for another person isn't beneficial to me. And likewise, what I do for cold exposure might be damaging to someone else, right? So we're going to need to be learning a lot more about tailored, customized forms of hormesis for each individual based on their tolerance in the future. And I see hydrogen as having a huge role of this protective capability and this potentiating capability, in using in tandem with all these other forms of hormesis.
Yeah, you've spoken a lot to the importance of individualization and really recognizing, okay, where's each person coming from genetically in terms of their health status, their goals, and then putting together a protocol that they will best respond to. We found the same thing with certain people. I use molecular hydrogen. I use your tablets. I use it via inhalation. And we've had certain people that I've put on a molecular hydrogen inhalation machine or given tablets, and they look at me and they're like, what is this? I feel incredible. Like I want to go out and take on the world. And then we've had other people where I've even bought them, sent them a whole bunch of tablets and a hydrogen machine. And they're like, honestly, I don't notice anything. It could be working, but I don't notice it. And you're right. We got to figure out, like, is this someone who's got adrenal fatigue from years or decades of running themselves into the ground, being so driven that they never gave themselves a day off, and they did all these very highly demanding workouts that like really push the central nervous system? Or is this someone who's been bedridden for a long time and all they need is a little bit of these exogenous antioxidants and some of this beneficial hormetic effect, where it sounds a lot like molecular hydrogen works similar to adaptogens, just on some different pathways, where like it's not going to take you to a place that's dangerous. It's just going to bring you back to balance.
Yeah, and that's what hydrogen seems to do. I mean, it's altered thousands of different, gene expressions, to date in the literature. That's why it's shown a benefit in 170 different models. And not every model is an anti-inflammatory, because hydrogen isn't anti-inflammatory. It regulates production of cytokines, both anti and, pro-inflammatory cytokines, right? So if you're not inflamed, it's not going to have any benefits on inflammation, right? Which is a lot more important than being an anti-inflammatory, and people don't get that. If you don't have excess oxidative stress, it's not going to really have any benefits in your redox status or oxidative stress. But there's other things too, like we need to look at people's genotypes, right? The only genetic responder trial in hydrogen to date, it was on mild cognitive impairment. It was 73 participants for 52 weeks. And it improved symptoms in people with mild cognitive impairment. It's kind of the step before, dementia, Alzheimer's, but only with people that had at least one ApoE4 allele. Right?
You said APOE4?
Yeah.
Which I have both of them.
So I have one, right?
Oh,
I have
okay.
ApoE4 and ApoE2, right? So that might be why we're responders, right? And I don't know about you, but when I change my dosing protocol and I take a high dose of hydrogen, I get a head rush. It tingles, through my entire head. And interesting, if you have two ApoE4 alleles, you should look at say fat consumption in your diet, because you're not metabolizing fat and using it as energy properly. I know a lot of people feel amazing on a keto diet. Every time I've tried it, I've gotten keto flu, I've gotten sick, I can't get out of bed, I feel like absolute shit, right? And I was just talking with Joe Cohen from South Hacked. We did a pair of podcasts together, and he's like, yeah, so that's because you have the ApoE4 allele. He's like, you're not processing those dietary fats.
Yep. So for anyone listening, that may or may not be familiar, APOE4, this is a gene. You can get it tested. You can go to a company like Life Extension. You can order a test to see your status. And this just further illustrates the importance of personalization. Not everyone's going to do great with a vegan diet. Not everyone's going to do great with a ketogenic diet. And if you have a gene, like in this example, APOE4, whether you've got one or both of them, if you're loading up on fats because you saw it on someone's blog or Instagram post, it may not be a fit for you, and it may go down to the genetic level rather than you're not producing enough lipase or something else that's like something else that can be addressed just with enzyme consumption, digestive enzymes and that sort of thing. So great point there. And I didn't even know the connection between molecular hydrogen and the APOE4 gene.
So we have it in one study in humans so far. So it's really exciting, and I think it's going to come down to what is someone's damage, what is their genotype, right? And in the years and decades to come, we're going to have a lot better information on what people are going to benefit the most from hydrogen, what people should take it, when you should take it. All of these things are going to become very, very important, and that's going to actually be true for, like we were talking about, like other forms of hormesis, from exercise to heat exposure to cold exposure to diet, right? And not just your genotype, but your microbiota, right? Because that's going to impact what the best diet is for you. So it's really, really cool and important stuff we're coming out with personalization of health, right? And it's kind of come full circle. We really needed science to be general for the last couple centuries to find out what statistically works on the population, right? Because when doctors were just guessing at things based on the patient, we weren't really learning anything about what we are physiologically. Now we've really advanced into our understanding of our physiology, right? Of our genome, of all these things, that we're full circling back. So protocols, drugs are being designed to target genotypes.
I'm curious, have you seen any other genes that are where people respond better to, molecular hydrogen to your tablets? And, you just got me thinking here on the fly, like the big ones that come to mind, you've got MTHFR, you've got COMT, HLA-DR, APOE4, which we mentioned. And there's so much possibility here, especially with how many people are finding out, oh yeah, I'm MTHFR, and they're taking more B vitamins. Could those people also benefit from more molecular hydrogen? I would imagine they would,
it's
right?
Possible. We need more responder versus non-responder studies,
Mm-hmm.
right? We need more, genotypes in humans that are studied alongside to do this. So far, it's just the one. There is a hypothesis paper, regarding hydrogen water that comes down to also, endogenous H2 production, because we're making liters and liters of H2 gas a day from our bacteria breaking down carbohydrates, right? Well, people with an impaired microbiota, right, they're going to be making less hydrogen gas.
Or on a low carbohydrate diet.
Yeah. So, they're going to be, making less and less hydrogen gas. Now, hydrogen in one human study and about 7 others in animals from mice to goats has overwhelmingly shown to impact the microbiota all in water, right? Which makes sense because when you inhale it, it's not getting into your gut, right, to do all these things. So that could be one of the reasons why hydrogen water seems to be effective in some cases where hydrogen gas isn't, right, and seems to be effective at a much lower dose than inhaling gas is.
Quick question on that. So we have seen the same thing, pretty much the application that we've used with the molecular hydrogen gas. We're doing this with a few clients that have, like now that I think about it, a few of them have tested for to be APOE4, at least having it having one copy of it. But have you found anything where I've seen some anecdotal evidence suggesting that molecular hydrogen tablets can be used as an energy substrate by the bacteria responsible for like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and not in a positive way? Have you seen anything there?
I've heard people ask that question a lot of times, and I know Tyler LeBaron has responded to this quite a number of times, and he said that it's the equivalent of adding a little test tube of water to an Olympic-sized swimming pool. That it's completely inconsequential when we think about the volume of H2 that we're adding, to people with excess of hydrogen. Because say with the tablet, you're maybe getting 70 milliliters of hydrogen gas, and you're producing 6 to 12 liters a day, right? So it's very, very small. I mean, again, we need better evidence everywhere. So far, like in my book chapter, we've evaluated the safety. Hydrogen seems to be overwhelmingly safe, very low adverse events, but there's less than 2,000 people that have been studied in the clinical research, right, across 80 papers. We need larger study groups. We need, better controlled study groups. We need to look at people's genotypes. We need to answer all these questions. And this is very expensive, right, to do, right? So this is often why it takes so long for things that aren't patented or to pharmaceutical to advance the knowledge, because teams interested get a small grant. They can do a study with 20 people, 30 people, things like this. Private companies at the same time have one goal. They want to show that it's effective for one purpose, and safe, so that they can get approved drug claims. And it really gives us bad science. Right?
Yeah, there's a lot of self-interest there. I mean, you and I were talking offline about the process that a lot of companies employ when they're doing studies. They want to get a specific outcome. They're doing the study to, to get that result. And you said they may throw away 15, 20 studies if they don't produce the intended result. And then the 21st one does it, and that's the one that gets published.
There's no knowing how many they can throw away, right? Because they don't have to publish results. Right. So, a private company can run a study over and over and over again until they find a result that they want to publish. Right. And then there's things like p-hacking, like to do it, like they can, have 30 different markers they're looking for and publish a paper. Oh, look, we improved this marker. Right. And it's just maybe a push on verse, like, a statistical anomaly that they can extend the trial or cut it short whenever the statistics are favorable. There's so many ways to corrupt the data and the research out there, privately. Now, publicly, researchers always want to study what their field of interest is, right? So public researchers don't really have any incentive to go and replicate work from another team, right? Which is why you see possibly why you see in things like hydrogen that's almost 100% publicly funded research is very little true replication work. There's a lot of supportive work, but true replication work, it doesn't really exist in the field, because every team says they want something new and novel, and they want it to be to their interests, right? And then again, because it's brand new, they're using smaller grant funds. So it's an 8 people or 20 people or 40 or maybe 60 or 100 at most, which of course isn't enough for like drug claims or anything like that. And it can take decades and decades of research until public funding gets big enough to do important studies, right, in an area. And it's something that I really believe in truth and finding out what is true, even if it is to the detriment to my own self-interest. We were talking offline a bit. I'm working with 9 public research teams, universities across the US, Canada, Europe, the Middle East, India, China. And I donate product. To some of them, I donate funds for extra markers to make it a better study. Others don't want any money from me. They just want product and placebo. And I donate all of this under no gag order. So it's called a publication agreement. This means that the teams are allowed to publish the results no matter what the outcome is, right? Because I want to know if it works, how it works, when it should be used, right? And what we should be looking at next, right? So also we're dealing with 4 public, teams for rodent research. I can't claim any benefits, right, from research done in mice, but it helps advance the body of knowledge on the subject, right? So we're working a lot with this. So far, I mean, we have 5 publications in humans. We're 5 for 5 on showing a benefit, right? We have 3 others under peer review. Hopefully those come out, early 2020. So we're talking right now, right before Christmas time. So hopefully they're out January, February. We have 6 more. So that would put us at 8 for 8, right? We have 6 more that are underway and 6 more, with ethics approval that are set to begin sometime in 2020 or, finalizing their ethics approval. I mean, we could be 8 for 8 and then all of a sudden be 8 for 20. We don't know, right? And that's the gamble that we're willing to take to make sure that the information out there is honest, right, and has integrity behind it, so that we can stand behind our product and say that this is what it does, and maybe in another case, this is what it doesn't do, right? At least the evidence shows that it doesn't do this, right? So we don't want to give people false hope. Right?
Yeah, I really appreciate that about you and the work that you guys are doing is you're taking the long view. You're not trying to find the study that's going to ramp up a whole bunch of sales before Christmas. You're gathering a body of evidence, some favorable, some could possibly show up to not be in your favor, but the stuff that comes up that's not in your favor will allow you to iterate and improve and come up with better protocols and find a better product to individual fit, so that I believe 10 years from now, 25 years from now, not only will you guys be the leader, but you'll have pioneered a lot of improvements in this field by not cherry picking and not just looking for the quick win and like, okay, how do we keep our costs, 1/10 or 1/20th of our price? You're saying, how do we put out the best product that's going to help the most people? How do we seek truth? And
by seeking that truth, we know who to market it to because we know who benefits from, right? So we know this isn't a panacea. It's not going to be for everyone, right? A large percentage of people could benefit from hydrogen, but we're under no illusion that this is going to be a magic pill for everyone for all instances. And there is no such thing as a magic pill, right? That's why you need various health protocols, hydrogen was likely protecting me, from metabolic syndrome. When I got to my worst shape, I was working 120 hours a week. I got up to 267 pounds. I'd been 170 when I was training hard. But again, I was working 120 hours a week. My shoulder, I was told not to really work out that much, waiting for my surgery. I had a string of tears in my legs because I was overtraining my legs. So I had 2 hamstring tears. I had a grade 2 calf tear. I strained my Achilles. So I was really impaired to do anything at all. And often I'd forget to eat, and all of a sudden it's 8 p.m. and I've been working since 5, 6 a.m. and I order pizza or you know what I mean? And despite everything, none of my metabolic markers were abnormal. My blood sugar was high normal, my cholesterol was normal, my triglycerides were normal, my blood pressure was high normal. But I definitely wasn't healthy. And I was down to averaging about 2,200 calories a day, most days. And at 267 pounds, I was gaining weight. I wasn't losing weight. And I just changed my protocol. I started working out less intense, but on the hour every hour, maybe do 40, 50 body squats, go kick the bag for a bit, work out some light biceps, not enough to aggravate my shoulder, just enough to keep my muscles moving. I started fasting, so I fast every week, minimum 43 to 48 hours, right? Every 4th week, I fast 67 to 72. And I've done a couple longer ones, like a 96 and a 120 now. Just by doing these little changes, right? A little bit extra activity, getting fasting, I was already time restricted eating, but not in a healthy way. Doing that, well, I've dropped 47 pounds from February to December now, and I'm eating 3,500 calories a day. Right.
Nice job, man.
So it is a great testament. Hydrogen is not a magic pill. It's not a magic bullet. It was protecting me, but it wasn't doing all of the lifting. Right. I needed other protocols to take control of my health.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about those protocols because if you're up for it, and I'd like the people, the folks that are listening to be able to have some actionable takeaways here. And we'll link to your hydrogen tablets, the ones that each of us are using. And, for anyone that's listened to past episodes where we've talked about, anyway, I won't go there, but, Let's talk about some protocols. Maybe I can share the way that I'm using it now, and you can share based on what you're seeing in the scientific literature and some of the ways that other people are using them and experiencing benefits, some other ways that our listeners might be able to apply this in their own lives. I mentioned when I fly. So when I fly, I'm usually getting a bottle of water. I'm getting on the plane. I'm dropping 3 or 4 tablets in that bottle and then pretty much drinking it as soon as they dissolve. And then I'm doing that for every 90 minutes I'm in the air. And then I do it again when I land. The other time that I do it is usually before a sauna. So I'll do anywhere from 2 to 4 tablets before a sauna and then get in there. I don't do it every single day, just because a lot of the benefits, it seems like, are greater when you're pulsing it.
Yeah, you're probably not going to have to change your protocols then, right? That's great. You want a high dose intermittent pulsing effect. We know from the literature that a continuous dose, even when it's much higher, is ineffective, right? You put, rodents under a hydrogen-rich medium, right, nonstop, and it has no benefits. Right, you put a continuous flow of hydrogen, on a cell culture, and you see no benefits. Likewise, if there's no damage to a cell and you add hydrogen to it, there's no benefits either. If it's a perfectly healthy cell, then you artificially damage it, and you see all these changes that happen. For people who do the same routine every day, so I can't really give you my routine other than a current routine. Like right now, I'm on a bit of a hybrid. Days I don't work out, I take them in the morning, right? I'll drink about a liter, probably total of 6 tablets. I'm a big guy though, and I have arthritis in 9 spots. And I chug it all down just like you do. 1 day a week, I take a hydrogen bath with bath tablets, right? And actually, anecdotally,
is this a separate product, or do you just take your tablets and drop them in the bath? Because I was thinking about that earlier when you mentioned when you were telling your story.
We have them on our website. They're 3 times the size, and they're designed for a bath. And anecdotally, and we do actually have a case study using these under review for a grade 2 ankle tear. And we have a registered clinical trial. 20 pro soccer players with grade 2 ankle tears are being recruited in Europe. And it's head-to-head comparing topical hydrogen to RICE protocol. So rest, ice, compress, elevate, because, the case studies that we did are almost magic, in swelling reduction. And that's the stuff we're seeing. We've got a number of like pro MMA fighters, UFC fighters, that we're actually endorsing right now. We've got a lot more UFC fighters and NHL players and stuff that are taking the tablets that we're trying to work out deals with. And universally, for these guys that are sore, they're beat up, bodybuilders too, that are just sore, tired, rigid, bruised, they find the baths to be more effective for their muscles and their acute injuries and soreness than drinking the water. And again, we're going to figure out in the future what the best administration method is for each area that we need. And it's something really, really important. I'm designing an inhalation system too. I think we're going to want combinations of different approaches. Like for one instance, we use water. One instance a bath. Do all these various things. I
agree. And I do use the inhalation regularly. I didn't mention it because we're specifically on the tabs, but I'll use the inhalation a lot when I'm working at home or even during meditation. You've got me so excited about these bath tablets right now. I'm going to pick up some as soon as we're off. Is it so for like a 200-pound man who's listening? What's the protocol for the bath tablets? Can you add things like Epsom salt, baking soda? Like what are you finding to work best?
Epsom salt, because the magnesium. Epsom salt works by magnesium relaxing the muscles. So the tablets have magnesium, right? And it becomes magnesium ions. So, it's a substitute for the Epsom salt, plus it gives you the hydrogen. Now, it depends what you're needing it for. If you're just a little bit sore and stiff and, for skin health and, slightly raising the concentration, you might only need 10 of these bath tablets, 6 to 10 of these bath tablets in a bath. You're going to get, to the minimum dosages of hydrogen in the water. Topically, hydrogen has shown to be effective at much lower concentrations than drinking, right? Which makes sense because it's very concentrated in the areas you're trying to get it to. So when you drink it, it's going through all your internal systems, and not very much is actually reaching your muscles and everything like that. When you're bathing in it, it's transdermal. It's going through. It's hitting a higher concentration there. For these acute injuries, we're using one of these bath tablets, which is 3 times the size of a drinking tablet per liter, right, for a 20 to 30-minute bath. So if you have, say, a torn ankle or knee or something like that, conserve the tablets, get a bucket, try and isolate them. You know, I've seen some incredible stuff. Like my common law girlfriend, partner, wife, she was training for the Boston Marathon, right, about a year and a half ago, and she's a competitive runner, and she's training for an Ironman right now. She's a little crazy hardcore. She got shin splints a few weeks before Boston. I had to pick her up from the train station and carry her. She couldn't walk, right? She took a hydrogen bath 11 days in a row. On her 11th day, she ran 34K, and a couple weeks later, she ran Boston, right? In the worst conditions that had happened in over 50 years, right? 100 kilometer or 60 mile an hour headwinds, like 33 degrees, something like what was it? Like 4 inches or something of freezing rain. Like, it was the worst finishing time since the 1950s. And she still, was only a few minutes slower than her previous marathon that she'd done, coming off shin splints a few weeks before. I've had this stuff too. I mean, really pay attention though, because it'll reduce the inflammation, but it's speeding up healing, but you have to be careful. You have to protect it. Like, when I did it on my grade 2 calf tear, my GP and my physio were blown away at the swelling reduction, but I still had no strength because I had a muscle. Right?
So be careful and don't jump right back in and end up worsening the tear before your body has a chance. Because
fighters get like pins in their hand and plates in their arms, or moved way ahead of schedule because of the bathing. Like, one of our sponsored athletes, she the swelling went down so fast that the pins actually poked through her hand, and she had to go to the surgeon and get it taken out like in half the time as expected. Right? I had something crazy. I tumbled about 400 yards down a double black skiing, and I hit a tree on the way down. And I likely broke my arm. Right? It was all swollen, and I got back and I'm like, oh man, I don't want to wait. Like, I wasn't sure if it was broken, and I didn't want to wait 8 hours in ER and, all that stuff. So I just put it in a hydrogen bath, and then it was really reduced next day. And I did that for 3 days. After 3 days, all the swelling was gone. And it was just a thin line bruise and acute pain.
This is incredible. I mean, our conversation has been fascinating thus far, but just hearing about what can be done with these bath tablets. So 6 to 10 of the tablets in a bath for more of
if you're just a little bit stiff, say you just work out, it's you're off the year a bit stiff, or, say you want to improve skin health. Yeah, you need 6 to 10 tablets, right? For just kind of a relaxing bath. If you are really beat up, the UFC fighters that we have doing it, and stuff like that, or if you're injured, you want as high a dose as possible. You want to immerse yourself. Like, when I get tears, I keep the water white, and I just stay in there for half an hour, and that's really acute treatment. And it gets expensive, but say doing that maybe is $50-$60. Think about how much a single physio visit or a single chiro visit is, when you're recovering for weeks at a time, and then ice packs and, all these things. It is a dramatic improvement, at least anecdotally, what we've seen and what we saw in the pair of case studies that are under review. It was almost magic. And we'll know, pretty soon in this, randomized controlled trial that we're doing. I think 8 of the 20 soccer players have been recruited to date. So we should know sometime, in Q1, Q2 of 2020, what the results are, and, a full head-to-head trial.
This is very exciting. Last few questions just around for more therapeutic dosages. You mentioned ankle injuries, right? So you could get a bucket, like a painting bucket, fill that with water, and then get a higher concentration with.
Use less tablets. Much cheaper than doing a full bath. I'm sorry, before I forget, if people do the same dose every day, you want to do a washout every 3 to 6 months and then change your dosing protocol, right? Anecdotally, we've seen in people who have been taking the tablets for 4 years that if you take the same dose at the same time every day, the benefits seem to wear off.
Yeah, right. That's pretty consistent with the scientific literature. Like, you got to pulse this stuff.
Exactly. Right. So don't take the same dose every day at the same time. I need to take it every day because if I don't, my shoulder freezes. Right. And I can't put on a shirt or anything like that. But every 3 to 6 months, I will let my shoulder freeze, kind of like I resolve like to a long fast that I'm going to put myself through hell. We'll stop hydrogen for a week, let everything seize up. I feel like crap, I can't sleep because I'm in pain. And then I change my dose and time that I do it. And I change my protocol and I run that for 3 to 6 months until I notice maybe the benefits are waning. Other people have reported that they've seen the benefits for a year and a half, until they've started to wear off. But pretty much universally, everyone that's seen a benefit that's had them wear off, when they do a washout and then change their protocol, the benefits come back.
Okay, and how long was that washout?
I say, some people have said they do it 3-4 days. I find I need it for about a week, right, when I do it. But I do really high dosages, right, of hydrogen too, that it might play a role there. It really makes a lot of sense too, because you think of all these other forms of hormesis. If you drink a glass of wine, say a glass of wine got you drunk when you're 16. If you drink a glass of wine every day, you're not spiking anything. By the time you're 20, let alone 40, 50, it's probably no longer hormesis. Maybe you need 2 or 3, right, to get the hormetic benefits of ethanol, right? Likewise with exercise. If you do the same exercise every day forever, it stops becoming exercise. It's just low-key damage to your body, right? Or cold exposure. The same cold doesn't make you as cold, and the same heat doesn't make you as heat. We're building up this stress tolerance, but it's these stresses that are bringing positive health benefits. So I really will say, like what you're doing when you're changing your administration, you're not taking it every day, you're doing it before hormesis, that's great. You're probably not going to have to change your dosing protocol for a very long time, if ever, right? But if someone else just wants a routine to take a couple tablets a day at the exact same time, at least every 6 months, do a washout for 3 to 7 days, and then instead of in the morning, take them at night or take them at lunch. Do it in a little bit of a different time of day.
Fantastic. And then the timeline for how much faster you've done this with a lot of athletes. On average, how much faster are you seeing recovery take place in, like, let's say, soccer players hurt their ankle, or you mentioned the surgery with inflammation going down. Is it 50% of the time, or what are you seeing?
Depends on the person.
Okay.
It can be a lot faster. Like the surgery times were like 50%. We've got one UFC fighter that has a broken rib, and he's training by doing a bath every other day. He's not sparring, right? But he's lifting weights, like, intensively high interval high intensity interval training. He's doing drills, right? It's broken rib, right? He didn't stop working out. And he says that if he doesn't take a bath like every other day, he stiffens up, right? And he's feeling it and he can't train. But when he takes a bath every other day, he's loose enough to keep his fitness up as he's waiting for it to heal. So I don't think there's a rule of thumb yet.
Is he doing 6 to 10 tablets in those baths, or is he loading them up?
We're loading them up.
Yeah. So what's loading them up? How many tablets is he doing?
He's doing a bottle of the R2 Relief that we have on our site.
Okay.
The other day right now. So that's really short term because he's got a broken rib. I'd never recommend anyone do that, long term all the time.
Just because we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know, and are the benefits going to wear off? And
right.
There's going to be a tapering effect. Like we see a very clear dose-dependent response of hydrogen, but there's going to be a plateau. Just like exercise, there's going to be a plateau, right? So maybe in a bath, going from 0.1 to 0.5, even up to 10, there's a benefit. Maybe it plateaus at 5. We don't really know yet. Since we can get 10, we're telling people to get 10, but do you need to do that every day? You know what I mean? Like, or every other day? Probably not, right? You probably want to spike that once a week, once every couple of weeks at most if you don't have damage. Use it acutely for when you need to, right? And then drink the water. And days that I have a bath, I don't drink the water, right?
All right. That's interesting. That's good to know.
And days that I have a hard exercise, 5 to 10 minutes before you work out. We notice at least, at the very least in heart rate, if you take it an hour before, it doesn't seem to impact, lowering heart rate as much as if you do it 5 to 10 minutes before you exercise. And we know that hydrogen's only in your system for about 15 minutes. So that this makes a bit of sense.
This makes a lot of sense, and we've got some amazing protocols here. And just to round it out for some of those acute injuries, like I'm not sure how we would do this with, say, a shoulder injury. I'm curious if you have a way to do it, but at least with like a foot injury, we talked about the bucket and using a painting bucket and getting some tablets in there. How many tablets would you put in a bucket to help with something related to plantar fasciitis or an ankle injury or something like that?
Sure, it'll help with plantar.
It won't?
It's very different. It's not really an inflammatory. It's kind of degradation, of the muscle and everything. Like for plantar, people should probably try and like lose some weight, do some strengthening exercises, get orthotics, like things like that. I don't think hydrogen's going to help with plantar. And anecdotally, it hasn't for a lot of people either.
All right. That's interesting. That's good to know.
For like ankle tears and stuff, it depends how many liters. I'd say at least one of the, if it's acute, if it's a tear, if it's an injury, at least one of the bigger bath tablets per liter. That's what we're running our clinical trials on, right? So not one that you're drinking, one of the, they look like this, it's R2 relief, right? One of these per liter, right? So what I do with my shoulder, it's really hard to isolate the shoulder. I'll just do a like half volume bath, and I drop the tablets right around my shoulder, right? Because how these quasi dissolved nanobubbles work, they take a long time to diffuse throughout the whole bathtub. So the concentration is way higher around my shoulder as it's in this quasi dissolved cloud, right? It's not homogeneous. So I just get it narrow, and yeah.
So this is great. To recap the protocols here, take your tablets 5 to 10 minutes per workout. Are you typically in the 2 to 4 tablet range for that protocol?
It depends on your size. Like, my girlfriend partner, she finds 1 tablet, right, or 2 a day, gets rid of her hip impingement, which is really common in female runners. She's like 110, 115 pounds, right? I need 4 to 5 a day to loosen my shoulder, but I'm a lot bigger. My damage is a lot worse, right? So I don't think we can give an exact dose per person yet. I always recommend people start at a lower dose, right? Because you don't want to go overkill if you don't need to, right? Start with 1 or 2 tablets a day. If you're a really big guy, say you're like 250 pounds, right? Maybe go a bit higher rate from the start because you have a lot more tissue that the tissue needs to diffuse through. But always start lower because then you can scale it up, right? You can add another tablet, see if it comes a benefit, add another tablet and see if it comes a benefit. I don't want to get into a lot of, claims that are more disease state, but we've seen this like in people I've coached where they're like, oh, it's helping with this, but not this, right? And they've upped the dose and all of a sudden it starts helping with something else too, right? And we're seeing that in the literature. Different states seem to have different dose-dependent responses, right? And different indications are probably going to need different administration methods, right? Maybe for sports or metabolic issues, the more is the better, whereas, some other issue, it doesn't really matter. 0.5 milligrams may work almost as well as 5 milligrams, right? We don't have enough information yet. And it's one of the reasons we're really researching or supporting a lot of these researchers, even the rodent studies and doing all this stuff, under no gag orders, is because if you only have half the information, you cannot predict these protocols in the future, right? You're obscuring the truth. Right.
Yeah, I totally agree. Alex, this is amazing, man. I'm very, very excited about all these protocols, especially the bath tablets and how those can apply. I mean, we're working with a number of the top athletes in the world and in their respective leagues, and one of the one of the complaints is, how do I recover faster? They're always looking to recover faster because that determines how hard you can train, how frequently you can train, and just your overall quality of life. And you've shared some protocols and some weapons here that not only work with people that are at the top of their game, training 6-7 days a week, but also just people who want to experience more peace and comfort in their body. So I really appreciate you having this commitment to quality, to truth and transparency, and for taking the long view on the work that you're doing and not chasing a quick buck, but rather creating something that's going to be an industry leader and helping millions and millions of people worldwide for the decades to come. So thank you.
No problem. And I don't want to sound like a saint. I mean, all this stuff is in my benefit too, right?
Yeah.
Use terms like long-term greedy. Like, the bigger the foundation I build, the more the truth is, the more this is going to last, forever or a longer time as we understand it. And I think that's really important. And I'm not just doing it for everyone else. Obviously, like, I'm motivated by my own need. Like, I needed this. That's why I started. And if I'm going to do it as my career, I have to do it right. And that's the bottom line, because I want to know for myself, I want to know for my family, for my friends, and I'm commercializing. So that means I need to know for everyone else too.
Yeah.
Right? So I don't know. It's kind of how my mind ticks. And I don't know, I guess it makes me feel uneasy when people give that kind of like, that kind of like hero, that I'm doing it for everyone. Like, because I'm doing it for myself too, but I also do care about everyone else. So.
Yeah, that's where a lot of this stuff comes from. Everything that I was figuring out for myself ended up being some of the foundational components. And
you're excited about the benefits you found yourself,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Funny, I was doing all this stuff before I'd ever heard the term biohacking. Trying to tweak my own protocols.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're an originator. And we've set up a discount for people that feel compelled to go to drinkhrw.com. That's where you can get the rejuvenation H2 tablets, which are the ones that I'm using. And then you can also get where are the bath tablets on your Drink HRW website?
Site in the same cart. So they're on the drinkhrw.com. I know we set up a discount code for you. I think we set up a dedicated page for you too.
Okay, we'll link to the dedicated page. I've got the URL. It's just we'll link to that. And anytime you guys are listening and you want to have all of the show notes, you can go to biohackingsecrets.com, and on the blog we'll have the episode with all the fun links to this stuff. Is it the bath tablets, are they under their own category? I'm looking at, we've got rejuvenation, your ageless defense, H2 beauty, fish oil.
Let me look. I don't run the website, obviously.
There's somewhere around here, I'm sure.
You'll see R2 relief and vivid actually too. The vivid are the same as R2 relief, but they have scent. They're scented.
Okay. Oh, I got them. H2 relief. So yeah, if you want the bath stuff, you get your H2 relief. If you want the tablets, you get the rejuvenation. Alex, appreciate you so much, man. This has been a lot of fun. We covered some of the science, some of your story. We got some great protocols here that are new to me, so I'm sure they're new to a lot of our listeners, and most excitingly can really give people a higher quality of life and more peace and mobility in this physical body we've got for this life experience, man. So thank you.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Where can people stay in touch with things you're working on? Do you do social media? Is there
Instagram is bigger. We've got a Facebook too, but our Instagram has a bigger following. I think we post more often there. I do have a blog website too, right? So all the new, clinical trials and everything we post on our blog site too. If people, go to the Drink HRW site, or if they order, your email gets put into our newsletter, so you'll keep up to date on all the new research and all of the stuff regarding hydrogen.
Beautiful. And your Instagram, is it just Alex Tarnava, Tarnava?
So that's my personal Instagram. I mostly just post like food pictures and stuff on there. At Drink HRW. So
at Drink HRW
is our
beautiful
page.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate your time. This has been a lot of fun, and thank you.
Awesome. Have a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.